Today on Ministry Monday, I'm speaking to Kate Basi. Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you for chatting with me on this Ministry Monday episode. You're no stranger to the podcast. We interviewed you and chatted with you about your book.
Mhm.
That feels like years ago. But how's the book still doing?
It's doing pretty well. I'm actually, it's you just do what you can with promotions as they come up and move and look on to the next thing. So I'm working on next books now.
Oh, good, good. A Song for the Road was the book we talked about. Are you going to do any books regarding music ministry in the future?
I don't know. The two that I have in the hopper right now are not on that topic, but I never did really get to dig in as much as I wanted to with the actual ministry aspect of what she did. So I certainly would be open to doing that if I can come up with the right story.
Nice. Well, good. Well, in the meantime, I did read A Song for the Road, but we can always pick it back up again, and I'll put the link in the show notes of this episode, but that's not why we're here today. Today we're talking about family and music ministry. Now, to give the listeners a little bit of a background, you and I both in our own ways have had family intrinsically linked to music ministry. And of course, I have been an NPM member since I was 10, and I used to, turn my mom's pages on the organ bench. I'm no stranger to music ministry, and I'm a product of that. And today I'd like to talk about you and your family being a product of family and music ministry. So, the reason that I really was inspired to chat with you about this topic is because I saw you advertise on social media that your family did a family music ministry concert at your local church. So let's start there. Can you kind of share a little bit about what that was about?
Well, we've done a number of things over the years. Mostly what we do is less a ministry concert and more just a most of the time we're doing a fundraiser concert for the Down syndrome organization that's here in Central Missouri because we have our child number 2 of 4 has Down syndrome. So that's the thing that we spend the most energy on. But I will say that during COVID, when our choir does a concert every Christmas. We just did it as we're recording. It's the 9th of January, and we just did that concert yesterday for Epiphany Sunday. We call it the Farewell to Christmas concert. And during COVID, we we couldn't have that. We didn't have choir. The for that year that we were completely out of music ministry, or that we were completely out of choir ministry, my family did the Christmas concert just ourselves because our kids had been involved. Christian and I kept doing music ministry over the course of COVID, and the kids just sort of naturally came in with us because we all were going to sit together. When they're spacing people out in the pews, it didn't make any sense to have kids in the pews. They were just sitting right there with us, and they all want to sing anyway. And Juliana in particular has yet to meet the microphone she does not like. So she's actually a microphone hog. So for her, being able to actually do music ministry was a dream come true. And so it was for the other kids as well. The youngest one has discovered that he loves percussion. And I was actually talking with Jaime Cortez at one point early in the pandemic, and he said how he got his kids involved in ministry was just give them an egg, give them an egg and let them start doing it. So that's where it began with us.
That's great. So did it start during the pandemic or was it before that?
Mostly during the pandemic. I think Juliana has often come and sung with the choir a little bit,
Hmm.
in and around, you know, religious education things that happen the same night as choir. But she was sort of accessory to the process. None of them were really involved until the pandemic hit, and we were all sitting there within like 6 square feet right around the grand piano, and and things started to just kind of happen in terms of that, because it was nice then, because if I had my kids singing, I could still play my flute. I know a lot of
So,
places didn't allow
yes.
that, but we were really like we were really separated off from everybody, and so we never had any prohibitions on me playing the flute.
Right. So, yes, if you're listening and you don't know, Kate is a flautist. And so a lot of the times I speak to someone who's maybe a keyboardist, an organist, a pianist, a guitarist, but you're a
I'm
flautist.
definitely not.
So you're a flautist then, and so in those first early days, what were the first steps that you took? Like, what were the first ways that they got involved? You mentioned, of course, percussion, but what were some of the other things that they really kind of gravitated towards at first?
Really, they were just singing. I mean, our kids loved to sing Christmas carols anyway, and they just love to sing everything. Actually, I have often wanted to um, get a video of my youngest child when he doesn't do it so much anymore because he's getting too big, but for about 3 or 4 years, every time he got in the shower, he was like drumming on the walls and singing in songs. Always One Direction. He was always singing One Direction. It was hysterically funny, and we never did manage to properly capture it, but it was very funny. So our kids just can't help themselves singing, most of them. And so it just seemed like a no-brainer to bring them in. If we were all going to be sitting there, we should just put microphones on them. We knew how to run the board and everything. So it didn't make any sense not to. And part of it is I was mentored into music ministry very young. I use this term choir babies. We were brought to choir practices in my little parish in Moberly, Missouri. It was a choir that only functioned at Christmas and Easter. So they would practice for 5-6 weeks before Christmas, and 5-6 weeks, probably all of Lent. I'm not really sure, kids don't have a sense of time, but we used to go and sit in the church, and I would bring books or bring homework or whatever, and I was just there. And then eventually I started playing flute, and my 6th and 7th grade teachers asked me to join the folk group with them when I was in the 7th grade. And so, I mean, I couldn't have been a very good flute player. I had only been playing for like 2 years at that point, but they asked me to come in and do that. And so that's always in my mind. If you're not going to get the kids involved early, you're not going to get them at all. We need to be mentoring the next group of liturgical musicians into the ministry.
Well, you and I both have been a product of that, just in our own unique ways. And so, going back to your family, how have you seen your children's faith develop in any way since they started to get more involved with music ministry with you?
It's hard to say. We're in that tricky age of life. I have 3 teenagers now, and so not all of them are super excited about church and God at all. Let's just be honest about that. They're really trying to find their hoping for finding authenticity. So they're struggling in different ways. Juliana, of course, exists on a plane all her own, and she doesn't worry about. She still believes in Santa Claus. She's 16 soon. She's the only one. So for her, she just doesn't question things. She just takes the world as it comes to her, and she's perfectly happy. My youngest has a beautiful faith, and I'm really trying to encourage and nurture that. And as you are a parent and you work through your own things, you also learn how not to talk about certain things in front of your children. And so I think that the change in my children's faith has more to do with the change in how I approach my faith and talk about it with them. I'm more intentional about doing that now. But what the music does is it just keeps them there. I mean, I know that I have another friend who said that he had no interest, he had no actual faith. He just wanted to play. And so he played, and eventually the faith caught up. And so I think some of that is you walk the walk until the rest of it catches up.
I like that a lot. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. So let's talk about Juliana a little bit. So Juliana, you've mentioned I always love reading your bio because you say that Juliana is your chromosomally gifted daughter. Is that correct?
Yeah, I say that all the time. I hope that it like catches fire actually and
Yeah.
becomes a thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it's okay if I say this, and please tell me if it's not, but I've always sensed that I just want to say in ministry in general, like sometimes I think we as music ministers want things to have such a polished product. And sometimes we, in this, Juliana, and not no Juliana, just music ministry in general, like with children involved, the imperfection is the holiness to me, and the joy that they bring is the holiness, because I think that, like you said, it's a testament to faith, it's a testament to witness. And so, like you said, Juliana has no qualms about getting up there and going to a microphone.
She would sing the psalm every week if you let her, whether she was ready or not. I mean,
Hmm.
she does not sing the psalm. We've put our foot down at that. That's a line. Um, but I we were worried when she was little because her brothers were all going to start being altar servers, and we've heard about people who were not like priests who would not let kids with Down syndrome be altar servers. We started the conversation early, but um, I think one of the things that works in our favor is that we have been so woven into the life of the parish for so long. Because I was the liturgy music director for 4 years in our parish before we started having children, and then I stepped back into a volunteer role just with the one choir. But our parish supported us through a very public infertility battle before we started having children. It was huge rejoicing when we had our first child, and when Juliana, who's number two, came along, it was wildfire all over the parish that the Basis had a kid with Down syndrome, and it just, usually you expect the number two child to get no attention at all from the community around, and it was like double what we got when our first was born. So we just had super duper support from our parish, and they have grown up around her. Like one of the essays I wrote and had published once was how it was about how Juliana wandered away from us and fell into the baptismal font. She was baptized, and I joke about it because she was baptized in the hospital. She had RSV when she was 6 weeks old, and she almost died. She was on a ventilator and everything. So we were really freaked out about COVID when it happened because we'd already been down the ventilator road. We knew what that was like, and it was terrifying to consider that again. So when she was 6 weeks old, she was scheduled for baptism, and then she got sick and she was still on the ventilator, and they moved heaven and earth. And this is a great story, but it's not a story for now, about having her baptized in the hospital with like 3 drops and no candle or anything. It was a very beautiful thing, but it was not the full thing. So I joked about how she had to go do full immersion baptism on her own when she was about 4 or 5 years old because she had to catch up with her brothers. So basically, she's just been so much a part of the parish. She grew up in front of everybody, and
Mhm.
people would know who she was. One day she got away from us. She had a habit of doing this when she was young, and it was terrifying. She would just disappear. And we found her one day walking across the parking lot. She was waiting by the car while we were still
Oh.
talking to people. But people knew, like a couple of times people walked her back to us. Juliana's over here. It even happened to us in the larger community. We don't live in a particularly small town. I mean, where there's 160,000 people in this town or something like that. And yet I lost her at the mall one day, and she and that was like on a Friday, and by Sunday we'd gotten all these contacts of people who had seen her at the mall and knew who she was.
Oh, wow.
People through church, people through the Down syndrome community, people who knew her. Anyway, so she has been a well-supported child, and for that reason we never really had any pushback from the parish about getting her involved. People were really willing. And she is also an extremely gregarious girl. She's cute, she's sassy, she's very interactive, and she's the only extrovert in our family. She is particularly well positioned to be an ambassador for her extra chromosome. That's what I like to say.
I love that. I love that so much. So, if someone is listening, what advice would you have for a music minister who has someone who, and this isn't necessarily even someone who would have a special ability like someone who has Down syndrome, but maybe someone who, I mean, my goodness, we could take it in a lot of ways. Someone who is new to music, someone who sings off key, someone who wants to be involved in music ministry but may not fit, may not immediately create like the expected idea of what a polished, adult choir or music ministry would be. Like, can you just kind of testify to the value of that for the person and what that really means?
Oh, the value for the person, I can't even begin to talk about. I was going to take it from a different direction. Um, the value to the person is to feel like they belong. There is, we allow you to be in our premises or on our premises. And then there is, you have a place here. And you have a place here is really important. My husband has been working for 4 years to get a program off the ground, that's a college residential program for people with cognitive disabilities. And one of the things that he learned in that process is that there is a, I'm just going to speak to disability in particular. In the state of Missouri, where I live, there are around 1,000 people who graduate high school every year with some sort of cognitive disability. And among them, they have a 25% employment rate. So, I mean, not a 25% unemployment. I mean, 75% unemployment rate. But people who go on, and those people tend, like, high school really is the glory days because everything is structured. They have a social environment. And then after high school, what do you do? There's nothing for those people. So having a place, having a place where you belong, where you have a role, where you have a function, where you have a structure, where you have an expectation, that gives meaning to life in a way that those of us who are neurotypical just don't think about because it's so understood. The rest of us have the opposite problem, is how do we draw the boundary and say enough? But people who have cognitive disabilities in particular don't have that. And this is a place where they should be. If anywhere they should be included, it should be there. Now, how you do that is a question. You have to, parents have to be realistic about what they can do. We're not going to send her up to the ambo to do the psalm, but we will let her sit in the choir. And we also have to be aware, step back from the microphone, Juliana. This is not like you're in the soprano section. This is not your show, So, because she does sing, she sings on key, but when she gets excited, it's not always on key. And she's really excited. So you can always hear her, but people tell us all the time how much they love it. They don't care about the perfection. People tell us, oh, I just love seeing your daughter's beautiful smile. I just love hearing her voice come over the microphone. It just makes me so happy. Everybody, like the whole church goes still. She sings in the teen ensemble as well here, and they let her announce some of the numbers out of the hymnals, and the whole church gets still because it takes her like 3 times as long to spit it out as it would take anybody else, and they have to listen because it's not as clear. But the whole church goes still and just holds its breath, waiting to hear her. So I think that that's a testament to inclusion and the importance of integration.
I think people like Juliana, I think, have more to teach us. I think that they're such a witness to true presence. I mean, presence of Christ, just for us to truly become a community. The fact that they really are truly engaged and listening, and not just at the ambo, not just during mass, but like you said, also just keeping an eye out, making sure that all are protected and all are surrounded. I mean, that, oh my gosh, that is so powerful. That really is so powerful.
Yeah.
What was the direction you were going to go before I said value?
Well, I was thinking about how you do it, because I've seen the conversations before on Facebook.
Yeah.
So we And I have some experience to back this up. We've had a choir since 2000 that was started with two singers, a guitarist, a bass, and my husband. And now that's the choir that we are in now, and we have 7 families that have kids in that choir. And well, the kids are not in the choir. The kids run around. It's chaotic. But there are 7 families in our choir that have children. So our choir babies, there are 11 of them that are frequently at choir practice in some capacity. And we my experience over the past 20 years has been that the more people you have in your choir, the better the choir sounds. And it doesn't have to be really great singers. So here's where we can move beyond disability and just into people who are new to music, people who don't read music, people who have trouble matching pitch. But if you hear an entire stadium full of people sing happy birthday, everybody sounds like they're singing in tune, you know?
Yeah.
But if you have a group of 4 people, my family sings happy birthday and it sounds awful. So I think that there's just safety in numbers, and the more people that you welcome in, the more likely you are to have something that is good for ministry. We're not supposed to be performers. Our choir is spectacularly good at leading communal worship. And whenever we don't listen to recordings very often, when we do, we're like, oh, I hear that, and I hear that, and I hear that, and things that we didn't hear when it was in the moment, because we're facilitating assembly song. It's not supposed to be a performance where everything is polished and perfect. And I think that's part of the power of it. The more polish you get, I have a feeling this is fighting words. My feeling is the more polished you get, the more you risk losing the passion, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And so we don't do any kind of audition for people coming in. They just come in. And some of them, there are some people in there who do want to sing a psalm, and we have to work really hard to work with them, practice a lot so that they can be comfortable, but they do a good job.
I think that's another level of being pastoral as well. I mean, this is National Association of Pastoral Musicians. And I do think that in so much of what we do, we're constantly evaluating and calculating the balance between bringing that higher praise to God through song, but then by also acknowledging the people that it comes from. And that, we of course, as pastoral musicians, we are trained of highest level, and we so want to bring that highest level, but that may not be bringing everyone to the table to be able to use the gifts that God gave them.
When I started conducting the choir in 2000, one of the first things I said to the choir was, this was a different choir at that time, the official choir at the church. I said to them, I'm not expecting perfection. And they all laughed and said, well, that's good, because you're not going to get it.
I feel like a lot of choirs would say that right back to you.
One of the things that I would love to share a little bit more about, though, as far as children specifically, is that I talked about those 11 kids. I was doing a calculation beforehand, and when we had our Epiphany concert yesterday, there were 9 of them, I think, were there and doing some sort of accessory percussion at some point during the concert for us. So what happened after COVID was that our kids had been doing music ministry for 1.5 years. And what are you going to do? Kick them back out of the music ministry?
Right.
We don't have time to do a children's choir. So we were like, well, we should start letting them do that. And there was another family who'd been doing the same thing we had been doing, just ministering as a family, 2 musical families. Their kids had been doing music ministry for 1.5 years. What are you gonna do? Kick them out of the music ministry? But then when they started doing little accessory percussion, then all the other choir kids wanted to do it too. And so it got to be, it's been kind of a balancing act to learn how to deal with that. I won't say we have it figured out. It's quite chaotic, because you have a lot of, what we came to the conclusion was that we needed to have 2 kids at a time. Like this week it'll be you 2, and next week it'll be you 2, and the week after that'll be you 2. But at Christmas, everybody wants to do it. So there was a lot of in and out and figuring out who's going to do what. And then they're all like running around the church, and then they're like putting their phone on and leaving it in one place and going someplace else to try to tell us about where they are. And the parents keep going, kids, it's just so, you have to really like take a deep breath and be aware that if you're a parent of multiple children, you already know it's chaotic, and you just have to be okay with a certain level of chaos. But all of those kids now are, first of all, they're learning to keep a beat, and secondly, they're learning that they have a place in the church too.
And isn't that something that generations are so asking for right now too, that they feel that in organized religion as a whole, especially the Catholic Church, one of the feedback pieces we've received and I've read is that they don't necessarily feel like they have a place, that it feels like there's not a place for them. So how beautiful is it that we can make sure that they do feel included?
We have a responsibility to include them. And if we can get them in a children's choir, that's great. I mean, that would be the ideal. But there's only so much of me to go around, and there's only so much of our music director to go around.
Right.
There's, you do what you can. And if you can't pull together a children's choir, then you figure out another way to get them involved.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Well, do you have any closing thoughts on this topic, Kate?
I just think that that this is really the call that we have. We want in our schools, our Catholic schools are a place where kids should be involved in the music, and they should be as deeply involved as they possibly can. They should be planning the music with the help of somebody who knows what they're doing, a liturgy music person. They should be singing the psalm. They should be doing the whole works. Because that's like, if we don't do that work, then we won't have a next generation to do music in the church.
Amen to that. Amen. Well, Kate, always such a true joy to talk with you, and such an easy pleasure for an interview. Like, it's just so nice to chat with you on a recorded line.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your passion on this topic, and also thank you for your example for not just your children and your parish, but also for us as pastoral ministers, reminding us what's really important.
Thank you.